Today, I'm going to share with you 5 surprisingly easy techniques to boost your LSAT score fast. These are tried and true strategies that have helped my students break into the 170s, and even if you're aiming for something more modest, these strategies can give you a serious edge. First, for those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, the first and biggest strategy I want to share with you is about how to master LSAT logical reasoning, which is now 2/3 of the test with the removal of LSAT logic games last year. Logical reasoning is now the section where small improvements can have a huge impact on your overall score because any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning are doubled across the 2 sections. So to maximize your points, you want to focus on the core question types to begin with. While there are roughly 15 different types of logical reasoning questions, some are more common than others. The most common 3 are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. Necessary assumption questions test whether you can ID what the argument absolutely needs in order to be valid. Inference questions require you to draw conclusions based on the information provided. And you want to understand the key distinction between must-be-true questions and most strongly supported questions. Must-be-true questions are a bit more strict, requiring that the answer be 100% supported by the stimulus. Most strongly supported questions, on the other hand, are a little bit less strict and simply require the correct answer to be incredibly likely given the stimulus, but not necessarily 100% guaranteed by the stimulus. Flaw questions are also incredibly frequent on the LSAT, and these ask you to ID a gap or problem in the argument's reasoning. So you want to start by mastering these 3 types before diving into the less common ones like evaluate the argument or parallel reasoning. But you don't want to just focus on question types. You've also got to understand the structure of the argument. Ask yourself, what's the conclusion? What's the evidence? And what is the gap between the 2? If you can map out these elements, you'll be better equipped to answer questions regardless of their type. For example, a necessary assumption question asks you to ID what the argument requires to hold itself together, and a flaw question asks you to describe the gap in the reasoning. Both rely on your ability to spot the argument's weak point. Now, here are some traps or common pitfalls to watch for in logical reasoning. First, you got to recognize that weakening an argument is not the same as destroying it. When a question asks you to weaken an argument, you don't need to demolish it entirely, just make the conclusion less likely based on the evidence. You also want to be careful that you're not misreading answer choices. Many wrong answers are designed to sound tempting, but they subtly miss the point. So you've got to practice during your review breaking down why each wrong answer choice is in fact wrong. You also want to make sure that you are not confusing necessary assumptions versus sufficient assumptions. These are not the same. Necessary assumptions are what the argument needs to survive, while sufficient assumptions, if true, make the argument airtight. Now, if you're consistently getting logical reasoning questions wrong, it's not enough to just read the explanations. You can leverage the Socratic review method to dig deeper and ask yourself, why was the wrong answer tempting, and why was it ultimately wrong, and why did the right answer seem unappealing, and why was it ultimately correct? If you can understand your unique thought process and the traps you're prone to falling into, you'll better avoid making the same mistakes again, which is why at LSAT Unplugged, we incorporate the Socratic review method into our courses, our small group classes, and our private one-on-one coaching sessions, and we guide you through this process through regular meetings on a consistent basis, ideally every single week. We also build review into your personalized day-by-day study plan to support you all the way through test day to maximize your score, getting you into the 170s. If you'd like my support, you can check out the links below to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, the second strategy I want to share with you is about streamlining reading comprehension. Reading comp passages, of course, are dense and designed to confuse you, but you can tackle them with the right strategies. You want to speed up your reading without losing comprehension. This is not about becoming some speed reader, it's about working smarter. Tools like Spreader and Phrase Reader let you practice reading at different speeds using LSAT passages or similar dense material. You can start at a comfortable pace and gradually increase it, aiming to finish reading the passage in under 3 minutes. You can also focus on simplifying the passage, breaking passages into broad categories like old versus new viewpoints or proponents versus critics to better understand the structure of passages. Now, you also want to ignore any jargon and focus on the big picture. What's the main point and what are the opposing perspectives? You can also triage the questions because there is no reason to tackle them in the order in which they're presented. Instead, group them by difficulty, tackling the easiest questions first, namely the global questions. Start with questions asking you, what's the main idea or what's the tone of the passage? These rely on your overall understanding. Next, move on to detail questions which are tied to specific parts of the text using line references or key terms. And finally, save the inferential and analogy questions for last because these require deeper thinking and are often the hardest. This approach, global, detail, inferential, builds momentum and makes sure you don't waste time on the trickiest questions right away. There's no reason to risk getting bogged down on those because every question on the LSAT is worth the same. So, if you find yourself stuck on a passage or a question, don't spiral. If you spend too much time on one passage, that means you'll struggle to finish the section. And if you're aiming to score in the 150s or low 160s, you could focus on 3 passages rather than 4 to give yourself more time, but this does set a ceiling on how high you can score. And so if you want 165, 170 plus, which I hope you do, I do recommend tackling all 4 passages, answering every question on the LSAT. Now, the third strategy I want to share with you is anticipating new trends in the LSAT. With logic games gone, LSAT is incorporating more games-style reasoning in the logical reasoning section, particularly questions involving numbers and percentages, having you analyze statistics, questions involving formal logic like conditional reasoning and contrapositives, and questions involving absolute versus relative values. So strengthen your practice in these areas on these concepts to stay ahead of the curve. Formal logic in particular is now more important than ever in the logical reasoning section. Of course, this is not some radical new question type. These questions have always been on the LSAT, so you can practice them in the old exams, but they're showing up a bit more often than in the past. So be aware of that. Now, the fourth strategy I want to share with you is to help you simplify your approach to inference questions. Inference questions appear in both logical reasoning and reading comp, but they're often misunderstood. As I mentioned earlier, there is that distinction between must be true and most supported. Must be true questions demand airtight logic, while most strongly supported allows for a bit more flexibility. Now, inference questions, though, are not about creativity. They're about extracting conclusions directly from the text or the argument. And remember to practice nuance. Subtle differences in phrasing can make or break your answer, so train yourself to spot these nuances during your review. Again, this is what the Socratic review method is all about. Now, the fifth strategy I want to share with you is to take control of your study process. The LSAT is as much a test of endurance and mental toughness as it is of logic and reading skills. So you want to practice active reading instead of passively skimming the passages. Engage with the material. Ask yourself, what's the main idea? What's the author's stance? Also, track your mistakes. Keep a log of every question you get wrong and every question you have difficulty with, and note what you'll do differently next time. You can also use those logs to help dictate your study plan so that you're targeting your weak areas, not wasting time on question types you've already mastered. And consider private one-on-one coaching because sometimes having an expert guide can make all the difference. Personalized feedback can help you ID blind spots and accelerate your progress because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So if you'd like my help getting that expert support on your journey to 170 plus, again, you can check out the links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. And in the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.